All right. Welcome back, everyone, to Red Spotlight. I'm your host, Alexis Soto, and I'm joined by absolutely nobody. I am here alone with the podcast that brings you everything coming out of the world of movies and more. And look, this is very impromptu. This is not something that I had anticipated in doing, but I just feel very passionate about what has transpired in just the last few days that I just have to do this and have to talk about this because if I don't, I will go absolutely insane. Let's face it, even if I do, I still will be because I'm probably going to sound pretty fucking insane right now. So, listen, we here on the podcast have, been fans of movies and film and talking about them for nearly 10 years now. And uh, it's not unusual to experience a lull in the week, or maybe that's not even the best way of putting it. Let's just say things happen that absolutely enrage us because it just seems that a lot of the takeaway has been unbelievably stupid for a variety of different topics, for a variety of different reasons. That just seems to be the case. So, what is going on now? Well, things have rapidly been changing these last 2 weeks as far as where awards season is going, what narratives are forming, then also what is the state of the movie business? What is the state of movies themselves and how we interact with them, right? And it seems like Variety, of course, didn't maybe they themselves did not Variety as in the publication did not anticipate that the strike might be coming to an end, so they obviously geared up some programming this week, which is just more of the same old schlop, but putting it out there, and it will never fail to just completely get everybody back into their entrenched sides and fight over the same idiotic issue. And what is going on right now is that Martin Scorsese, who is now 80 years old and has been talking very frankly in all of these interviews in the ramp up to his latest film, Killers of the Flower Moon, that he is nearing the end of his life and he is facing his own mortality. And this is one of the most cherished and beloved filmmakers of all time. And he is asked a question that regards the comic book space. And again, we've already been asked that question. He answers it, and everybody just completely just refuses to engage in the actual substance of what he is talking about. And so when the big headline coming out of Variety was, oh, we need to fight off this culture of comic book movies. Very charged language there. And because a lot of the conversation is happening on film Twitter and online, it just gets out these comic book fans, and and they act as if they're going to war on behalf of their chosen studio or chosen comic book hero or here, that, there. And then there are a bunch of people who should know better, don't at all grasp what it is that is trying to be communicated, and then also just take shots at Martin Scorsese. And I just, it angers me so because look, the substance of what he is saying is the same substance of what he said back in 2019, and the trades themselves refused to engage in that because, first of all, they're not interested in anything changing, but they're most concerned with the clicks coming out, on their sites. And that's exactly what happened with this particular story. With fighting off the culture of comic book movies. Why does Scorsese care so much about that? Because they have pushed all other kinds of movies out of the theater. And if, I know some people were saying that, well, no, it wasn't the comic book films that did that. It was streaming that did that, which, if that was the case, and that is partially true, there is another reason why streaming was a big fucking mistake in the first place. But if you couple that, really at the end of the day, what you have here is a combination of streaming and comic book movies joining forces to push out, of all things, the mid-budget range movie like, comedies, which has been in and of itself a genre that's found itself pushed out of theaters and just found exclusively in streaming. The reality is these last 10 years was the, first mass embrace of this new model called streaming. And then we all had the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think we have to deal with some hard truths here. Just because we can point to the MCU having had horrible ramifications for the state of film and for filmmakers does not mean personally we have hatred for the creators or the actors or the storytellers who participated in those movies, or for their fans. And that is not at all what is being communicated here. And people are taking this way too personally. That's not at all what this is about. You are more than welcome to enjoy whatever it is that you want to, and that's not something he wishes to take away from you. People are focusing way too much on the comment that he mentioned that, to him, those films don't elicit any kind of emotion. They don't move him. But that's his right. Every person has the kind of stories that they like, right? And a lot of these comic book fans wouldn't give a rat's ass about any other kind of film that wasn't what they already like. And it's fair for people to have their opinions and like what they like and not like what they don't like. But somehow this whole thing of like saying that comic book films aren't cinema, he's saying it's not the cinema to his preferences. It's not what he likes. And it's that what he likes personally is what's being pushed out, is what's not being made. Because what has happened is, because of the MCU's success, all the studios have just gone all in with pursuing not just the comic book genre, but, blockbusters that are emulating the MCU, looking into intellectual properties, looking into cinematic universes. That is all that they have been putting their vast resources into alongside streaming. And we have seen these last 10 years just really be devastating for any kind of film that wasn't in that particular genre. Now, granted, right now, as we have been speaking to this year, we're living in what we call a paradigm shift. There are a changing of tastes that is being seen right now when you look at the box office results of this year. A lot of those comic book films are not, well, first of all, quality is kind of beside the point. Quality didn't have much of a barometer when it came to how successful a comic book film would be in the previous decade. But now it seems you have to be really, really, really good to be successful, because the rest of them have not been up to that standard and they have crumbled, and audiences have just said thanks but no thanks. We're not interested. So that's why I feel we are seeing a changing of the guard here, as is what is only natural when we transition from one decade to the next. So it's pretty funny how we're seeing a whole bunch of people, bring out their pitchforks and their knives and defending their comic book films as if they're being, attacked, when the reality is of course, they're probably too completely unaware to even realize it themselves, but the numbers don't lie. And audiences right now en masse are rejecting a lot of these comic book films, with the exception, of course, being Spider-Verse and Guardians 3, which made a lot of money, but those were received tremendously well, unbelievably well, in comparison to what other films were received as in that particular genre. But the reality is here, there is just this loss of storytelling, this loss of films. And I feel like this entire conversation, and there's this whole group of people who just refuse to engage in what Scorsese is actually speaking to. I don't believe these people are being disingenuous. I don't think they're being willfully ignorant. I just think they're literally they're incapable of being able to see what is actually trying to be communicated there. And it's pretty clearly, and again, to be fair to them, it's not just their own obliviousness. It is the reality that the industry itself is willfully spinning this story on a never-ending wheel cycle, because they know they can profit from it. and they can guide traffic back to it. And it's just the same never ending conversation. And the question that's being asked all throughout the media is, Martin Scorsese said that, comic book films aren't real movies. What do you think? That's not what he's fucking saying. He is saying that those movies should not be allowed to be all of what cinema is known as today. There's so many different kinds of films that, let's just say, for example, last year, that are considered the cream of the crop as to like what cinema should be like, or at least that's how it was received alongside the critics and of course all the guilds. But do you think they made any kind of money? No, I'm talking about Tar, Banshees of Inisherin, The Whale, Fablemans. And that's just the name from last year. There are, of course, other films like, well, there's Parasite, there's Roma. There's so many. Oh, and that didn't have a theatrical release. But you know what I'm saying here ultimately is those kind of films no longer seem to have an audience out there at the box office for a variety of reasons, obviously. So it seems to me just sad, right? I mean that's a part of our culture that we're losing. And I spoke to this in the last Ahsoka reaction about how we have lost a bit of the culture, the bit of the film culture, because of a loss of a intellectual curiosity in film, which only then leads to a loss in ability to detect themes and arcs or just storytelling 101. And it's all just kind of in this never ending circular hellscape that we can't seem to get out of. And as Peter said, I was having a conversation with him, and look, the battle has already been fought, won, and lost over. Again, we're seeing a paradigm shift, and we're going to see what kind of blockbuster and what kind of comic book, or if any, we'll see what genre is going to dominate the box office this particular decade. But the reality is, I'm just really enraged that so many people are just, are that incapable of being able to see what is so clearly being communicated. And they just don't seem to care. And I just find it rich that a lot of these people who cling to their comic book films or their MCU movies and claim it to be the end all be all of, cinema in 2023 would not themselves ever be bothered with, or could not be bothered with, seeing anything that was outside their comfort zone. Barbenheimer, notwithstanding, that had a whole different cultural event that was in and of itself fueled by a social media challenge that, of course, ended up getting a lot of interest for many different reasons. But there are so many films that come out every single year that most people would not be bothered with caring about. And I don't, see that being any different with Scorsese's upcoming picture. It's very clear to see how it is that Marvel has really damaged film in the industry. And it's not at all the same thing as saying you are not allowed to like their movies. You are not allowed to like them or any of the actors or the characters. No one is saying that. That's not even the issue. And you trying to make that the issue of this is you engaging in everybody en masse ignoring what the real fucking issue is. Right? But it's just, I mean, you go online and you find a whole bunch of people who have so many followers who themselves are considered to be influencers in this particular space, are just incapable of grasping what he is saying. And it's just like, speaking to this mentality, by the way, of what we would consider to be cinema, and then what ends up being, brought into the conversation. I had mentioned this in the last Ahsoka reaction that, and it was really encapsulated in Trevor Noah's recent comments. Well, I say recent, but it was a few years ago, that none of the big films that he sees are ever nominated for the Academy Awards. And there is this school of thought out there that, the films that are, nominated and then win are depressing, make you feel like crap, and it's not what people, go and watch movies for. They watch it for joy and they watch it for entertainment. And then, of course, when you extrapolate that to the comic book baseball, they're always like, well, Infinity War and Endgame, and why didn't they get Best Picture nominations? Like, there were just massive events that everybody went out to see. And it's like, if you have that kind of mentality, first of all, you're not watching enough movies. And you know what? I had to learn that the hard way too, because I was one of those people that years ago was like thinking, maybe not a win, but why weren't these big Marvel films being recognized in some way for the achievement of how popular they are? Of course, that in and of itself, I realized was a rather dumb thing to be wanting for, and it seems like um, it's going to be taking some kind of shape when it comes to the upcoming awards race. The Golden Globes right now are, they're trying to find themselves. They're doing some soul searching. They have been doing that for some years now. But Tim Gray, formerly of Variety, is now in charge of them. There's a whole new group in place. Nobody knows where they're going to broadcast their telecast, wherever it would be from. But they announced just today that they're going to be adding 2 new categories, one of which mystifies me. I didn't realize there was this need for a stand-up comedy award, but we'll just chalk that up to just them being weird. And then the other thing is this blockbuster award, this box office achievement award, which, a lot of people would say, well, them being movies that end up being successful at the box office, that in and of itself should be its own reward and that recognition. There shouldn't necessarily need to be an accolade created just for that. And this really reeks a lot of what happened a few years ago when the Academy tried themselves to create a best popular film category. But then because people were like, this is the worst idea ever, they just, they got rid of it. But, the Globes have no shame. So that's not going to change. And I'm not necessarily against them trying. Let's go ahead and have this, and let's go ahead and try and see how it goes. But it does perpetuate this mentality that there need to be more blockbusters in the awards conversation. And look, not for nothing, I do think there is something to be said for the fact that there are some genres that are literally invisible when it comes to people who are in these organizations, whether it be the guilds themselves or even the critics groups when it comes to handing out awards for what was the best of something in a given year. I feel in the last few years, more than anything else, there have been some pretty clear-cut examples of, let's just say, for example, original score or visual effects that belong to some pretty noteworthy and big movies that I would also argue were of the caliber of award worthy, but they weren't because of the name of the movie that they belonged to. I mean, what was his name? Roger Deakins, who is, the most well-known and respected cinematographer, said just last year that he personally felt that the Batman's cinematography was the best of any of the films that came out in 2022. And he just flat out said the reason why that wasn't even nominated was because it wasn't a comic book movie. So no, there's a bias out there for sure. And I do agree with the idea that at many points they do allow that bias to just completely gatekeep. Then again, they gatekeep for any reason and any kind of movie. So it's not just exclusive to that, and I just don't care about that. But can anybody really tell me that Michael Giacchino's Batman score was not something that was worthy of consideration? I mean, right now, we're literally living through a moment of it right now. I mean, I think most people could tell you that Across the Spider-Verse is one of the year's best films and should receive a number of nominations, but it's not going to because it's an animation. That's a medium that they themselves have, and I say they, the Academy themselves, have repeatedly revealed themselves to just think it is exclusively for children. I think even, I don't know if it was the Globes or some awards ceremony that happened just earlier this year when presenting animated feature, they had the only child presenter. I wonder why that happened to be the case. It's pretty obvious why that happened to be the case. There's no mystery there. So I'm not going to say that blockbusters themselves are should not be given more recognition. They should. in the avenue of artistic merit, sure. But that doesn't necessarily, and it shouldn't necessarily have to mean that there should be literally, they're of the caliber of some of the best picture winners, like a Parasite or an Everything Everywhere All at Once. However, you're really going to tell me that a Batman or an Infinity War or Into the Spider-Verse were somehow inferior to Coda or Green Book? So, yes, it's not a one-to-one. I feel like when it comes to different films and different cases, I can see and I can hear arguments, but at the end of the day, what I didn't like about the announcement of this particular creation was that it just spits in the face of Marty, because Marty at the same time is just saying, hey, we need to push back against these movies dominating the conversation, dominating everything. And then what do the Globes do the next day? They create a category that is just all about handing an award over to what movie got the most money that year. I mean, what? So, man, it's just frustrating, man. Unbelievably frustrating. And I don't know ultimately what the fix is or what the solution would be.